Every single person in this room has walked through something that could have broken them. Maybe it was a loss, a betrayal, a failure, or a moment where life brought you to your knees. And yet, you're here. You didn't just survive, you endured. And there's a reason for that. See, the world tells us that pain is something to avoid, but I believe the truth is the opposite. Pain is the birthplace of power. And the strongest people you'll ever meet, they weren't handed strength. They built it through storms, through silence, through scars no one else could see. This isn't just a motivational message. This is your mirror. Because if you've ever wondered why life tested you the way it did, it's because it was preparing you, not to stay broken, but to rise, to become someone unshakable, someone who uses the weight that once crushed them as the very fuel to lift others. So don't look away from your pain. Don't bury it. Bring it with you into this moment. Because by the end of this message, you're going to see what strong people already know. Your greatest pain can become your greatest source of power. And this is how strong people are made. You know, people often think pain is this dark, ugly thing they have to hide from or get rid of. We're conditioned to believe that when something hurts, the only answer is to numb it, avoid it, or pretend it's not there. But let me tell you something that took me years, and I mean years, to fully understand. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is not a punishment. Pain is a message. It's the body, the heart, the soul saying, hey, something's out of alignment. Something's got to change. Most people run from that message. They drown it out with distractions, food, phones, people, addiction, endless busyness. But strong people, the ones who rise, they do something radically different. They listen. Not because it's comfortable, but because they know there's power on the other side of discomfort. They lean in and say, all right, what are you trying to show me? You see, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. I know, maybe that's hard to believe right now. Maybe you're in a season where things feel heavy, unfair, or chaotic. But what if? Just what if life wasn't trying to destroy you? What if it was trying to awaken you? There's this moment when a person hits their emotional rock bottom, not always in public, not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's that moment when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like everything's falling apart. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's awareness. That's your soul tapping on the door saying, it's time. And when you finally stop resisting and start listening, the message gets clearer. Maybe it tells you to leave that toxic relationship. Maybe it tells you to finally stop betraying your own needs to please others. Maybe it tells you to heal that wound you buried 20 years ago. That message is unique to you. But here's what I know. If you can face it, if you can get honest with yourself and look pain in the eye instead of avoiding it, it will transform you. Because pain has this sacred way of stripping away what's not real. It burns off the masks, the ego, the false identities, and what's left is truth. What's left is the raw material of your power. And once you find that power, that core, that essence of who you are underneath it all, you become unshakable. This is the turning point where people stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I create because of it? That's where strength is born. That's where resilience is built. That's where people start living not in reaction to their pain, but in command of it. Because when you stop running from the pain, you start running toward your power. Let me ask you something. What story have you been telling yourself about who you are? Because every single one of us has a story, a narrative, a version of events that we've carried for years, sometimes since childhood. And that story becomes the lens through which we see everything, our worth, our potential, our future. But here's the truth. Most people aren't living their lives. They're living their stories. Maybe your story says you're not good enough. Maybe it says people always leave. Maybe it says success isn't for people like you. And the thing is, that story might not even be something you created. It might have been handed to you by a parent who didn't believe in you, by a teacher who dismissed you, by a world that labeled you before you knew who you were. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's been repeated doesn't make it real. And this is the moment right here where everything can change. Because what makes strong people different isn't that they've had easier lives. It's not that they've avoided pain or failure or betrayal. It's that they made a decision, a conscious, powerful decision to rewrite the story, to stop carrying around a version of themselves that was shaped by fear or rejection or trauma, and start creating a new narrative, one that reflects who they really are. You have that power. Right now, you hold the pen. You're not stuck with a script someone else gave you. You're the author. And that means you can flip the page. You can take the most painful chapter of your life and use it as the setup for a powerful comeback. You can say, yes, I went through that, but it's not the end of my story. It's the beginning of a new one. People ask me all the time, how do I let go of the past? And I tell them, you don't forget it. You reframe it. You look at it through the eyes of strength instead of shame. You don't say, this ruined me. You say, this revealed me. You don't say, I was weak then. You say, that was the moment I began to learn who I could become. Because what defines you is not what happened to you. What defines you is what you do next. The moment you realize that, you stop playing the role of the wounded and start becoming the warrior. You stop blaming the past and start building the future. That's where real power begins. Not in denying your story, but in reclaiming it. And when you do that, when you take the pen back, your life will never be the same. Let me tell you something that most people never realize. Your emotions are not random. They're not weaknesses. They're not just something to manage or suppress. They're energy, pure, raw, powerful energy. And the question is, what are you doing with that energy? Because here's the truth. Every emotion you feel has a direction. Fear pulls you back. Anger wants to explode forward. Sadness drags you down. But strength comes when you decide to take that emotion and channel it. Not avoid it, not numb it, but direct it with purpose. Think about it. Have you ever been so angry, so heartbroken, so frustrated that you wanted to scream, to break something, to give up? That's not weakness. That's power looking for a place to go. And the people who rise, the ones who take their pain and turn it into something greater, they learn how to redirect that emotion like a current. They don't let it flood them. They use it to fuel them. I know people who've used their deepest grief to build legacies. People who took the pain of rejection and turned it into a reason to succeed. People who could have stayed down, but instead said, I'll show you what this pain can do. That's not denial. That's mastery. They didn't wait for the storm to pass. They learned how to use the wind. See, when life hits you hard, most people default into two states, collapse or rage. And neither one leads to growth unless you consciously choose a third option, creation. You can take that rage and turn it into a business. You can take that heartbreak and write a book. You can take that fear and build a movement. You just have to stop thinking of your emotions as enemies and start recognizing them as fuel. And no, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's necessary. Because here's the thing. Emotions don't go away just because you ignore them. Suppressed pain doesn't die. It waits. It shows up in your relationships. It shows up in your habits. It leaks out when you least expect it. That's why the people who win at life are the ones who learn how to lead their emotions instead of being led by them. You don't need to be afraid of how deeply you feel. In fact, the more you feel, the more potential you have. Your intensity is not a problem, it's a gift. But only if you direct it. That means getting honest about what you're feeling and then deciding what you're going to build with it. Because in the end, it's not about having less emotion. It's about using more of it for something meaningful. And when you learn to turn emotion into motion, that's when you start to rise. There comes a moment in every person's life where they have to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm not going to live like this anymore. Not because they've figured it all out, not because they're suddenly fearless, but because something inside them refuses to stay small, stay stuck, or stay silent. That moment, when you raise your standards, is the moment your life begins to change. See, most people don't get what they want in life. They get what they're willing to tolerate. Let that sink in. The quality of your life isn't shaped by your dreams. It's shaped by what you allow, what you accept, what you settle for. And if your standards are low, even unconsciously, life will meet you there. You get just enough love to stay, just enough money to survive, just enough energy to make it through the day, but not enough to thrive, not enough to lead, not enough to live fully. Strong people don't accept that, not because life handed them a better deck of cards, but because they decided that their current situation was no longer acceptable. That decision is everything. When you raise your standards, when you say, I deserve more than this, or I will no longer betray myself just to keep peace with others, you shift the entire direction of your life. And it's not a one-time thing. It's a daily decision. This isn't about perfection. This isn't about being rigid or having unrealistic expectations. This is about getting crystal clear on what you will no longer allow in your body, in your mind, in your relationships, in your business, in your spirit. Because what you tolerate, you reinforce, and what you reinforce, you become. Let me be real with you. Change is uncomfortable. It costs something. The moment you raise your standards, you're going to feel resistance. People might not like it. You might question yourself. Your old identity will try to pull you back, whispering, who do you think you are? That's normal. That's the test. But it's also the gateway. Because on the other side of that discomfort is growth you didn't even know was possible. And here's the beautiful part. When you raise your standards, you raise your energy. You stop settling for crumbs and start demanding a feast. Not from ego, but from worth. You show the world, and more importantly yourself, what you're made of. You start choosing foods that fuel you, relationships that honor you, work that fulfills you. You stop reacting to life and start creating it. Every boundary you set becomes a declaration of your value. Every time you say no to less, you say yes to more. Because strength isn't built in comfort. It's built in the fire of decision. And when you decide what you're no longer available for, you step into a version of yourself that's been waiting for you all along. There's a moment after you've gone through hell, after the breakdowns, after you've clawed your way through the pain, where you realize something powerful. All of that struggle wasn't just for you. Yes, it shaped you. Yes, it strengthened you, but it was also preparing you for something bigger than yourself. Because the greatest transformation doesn't happen when you just heal. It happens when you take that healing and use it to help someone else. Strong people don't keep their power to themselves. They share it. They give it away. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they remember what it was like to suffer in silence. They remember what it was like to feel broken, to feel unseen, to feel like no one understood. And that memory becomes fuel. It becomes purpose. You've heard people say hurt people, right? Well, it's just as true that healed people heal people. When you've been through something and come out the other side, you carry with you a level of empathy that can't be taught. You know how to look someone in the eye and say, I get it, in a way that lands deep in their soul. That kind of presence, real, raw, lived through it kind of presence, is more valuable than any advice, any strategy, any book, because it's not theory. It's truth. It's earned. When you shift from why did this happen to me to how can I use this to serve, everything changes. You move out of survival and into significance. You realize that even your darkest chapters can become someone else's light. And the moment you begin to give from that place, you become unstoppable. Not because you have it all together, but because your contribution becomes bigger than your pain. And you don't have to start a foundation. You don't need a platform or a mic. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is be the person who simply shows up, who listens, who tells the truth, who holds space for someone who's hurting, not with answers, but with understanding. That's power. That's strength. That's leadership. We're not here just to take. We're here to give. And the most meaningful giving doesn't come from your comfort. It comes from your overcoming. Every scar, every lesson, every time you got back up, those are your gifts. And they were never meant to be buried. They were meant to be used. Because when you give from a place of authenticity, of depth, of lived experience, what you offer has weight. It has impact. It has the power to change lives. Because strong people aren't just built in isolation. They're built in service. And the moment you turn your pain into purpose, your story stops being about survival and starts being about legacy. There's a lie the world likes to sell, that strong people are born with something the rest of us don't have, that they're fearless, disciplined, unshakable from the start. But that's not how strength is made. You want to know what creates strength? It's not talent. It's not luck. It's decision. Not once, not twice, but over and over and over again. Strong people are forged in fire because they keep choosing to show up even when it hurts, even when it would be easier to quit. They make a decision not just when it's convenient or when everything lines up perfectly, but especially when nothing makes sense. When everything in their body says stay down, they make the decision to rise. And that decision doesn't happen once at the top of a mountain with dramatic music playing in the background. It happens in quiet moments. At 5 a.m. when you don't feel like getting out of bed. In the middle of an argument when you want to explode, but you choose growth. In the silence after a failure, when no one is watching and you decide to keep going anyway. You don't build strength from the easy choices. You build it from the hard ones. From the days where motivation is gone, when the pain is heavy, when nothing is working and you feel like giving in, and then you decide not to. That's what builds mental toughness. That's what shapes character. The power doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the commitment you make on the inside. And the stronger that commitment, the more unshakable you become. I've seen people completely change their lives, not because they had all the answers, but because they made one powerful decision. I will not live like this anymore, and then they backed it up. Day after day. Was it perfect? No. Were there setbacks? Absolutely. But every time they got knocked down, they made the same decision. Get up again. And that decision, repeated enough times, becomes identity. It becomes your new standard. It becomes who you are. So don't wait for the feeling to come. Don't wait for the conditions to be perfect. Choose. Right now, decide who you're going to be and commit to it like your life depends on it. Because in many ways it does. The life you want, the strength you're looking for, the purpose you've been craving, it's not out there waiting to find you. It's waiting on the other side of your next decision. Because in the end, pain doesn't make you powerful. The decision to rise, in spite of it, does.